The noose, the legal noose, tightened around the neck of this criminal son of a bitch, Donald Trump. As you know by now, obviously, the heavily redacted warrant that was issued by a court in Florida to conduct a search at the criminal-in-chief's Winter Palace has been released. And by the time you hear this podcast, I'm sure it has been discussed and taken apart step by step, paragraph by paragraph, to the extent that we fully understand now the depth of the criminality this son of a bitch has created. Now, he may have escaped to impeachments. He may have escaped the so-called Russia investigation. This son of a bitch has skated free from every criminal act that he has ever committed, whether it was in the presidency or when he worked at NBC or when he was a con artist grifter who was a so-called developer in New York. Wherever this man has gone, crime has been left in his wake. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have experienced this grifting son of a bitch's actions against them, either not paying them money he owed or breaking promises, breaking contracts, causing criminal activity. Trump is, in fact, probably the master criminal of the 20th and 21st century so far. There may be more like him. We always have to worry about his two fucked up sons and his grifting daughter, although his grifting daughter has, with her husband, stolen enough while her father was president that I don't think she needs to grift anymore, nor does her asshole husband. But here we are. Today was the day that the affidavit, that's all, the affidavit that stated categorically why the Justice Department felt it necessary to conduct a search warrant and get these items that this unconscionable prick Donald Trump has stolen. So, more to come, as they say. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a moment. There's not that much. I'm recording this in the afternoon, so there's not that much that I can share with you right now. Like I say, by the time you hear this podcast, you will have a better explanation of the close to 200 classified documents, 25 of them marked as top secret, that Trump stole. And like I said at the very beginning of this investigation, or the application of the search warrant, in my opinion, based on the fact that we all know that Trump is a lying son of a bitch, a con artist, a deceiver, the worst kind of person that you'd want to associate with on any level. Never the president of the United States. Jesus. That because of his history and because of who he is, in my opinion, the reason he stole this shit was so he could sell it or use it to blackmail people. I mean, this is Trump's mindset. What a prick. What a total prick. Whoever knowingly alters, destroys, mutilates, conceals, covers up, falsifies, or makes a false entry in any record, document, or tangible object with the intent to impede, obstruct, or influence the investigation or proper administration of any matter within the jurisdiction of any department or agency of the United States for any case filed under Title 11 or in relation to or contemplation of any such matter of case shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 20 years, or both. Now, this is one of the statutes of the U.S. Code, in my non-lawyerly opinion, that the Orange Vomit has repeatedly violated. Maybe 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 or 200 separate cases against the bastard could be made using this. It's under Section 18 U.S. Code, paragraph 1519. Now, here's another one. This is also under 18 U.S. Code, paragraph 2071. Whoever willfully and unlawfully conceals, removes, mutilates, obliterates, or destroys, or attempts to do so, or with an intent to do so, takes and carries away any record, proceeding, map, book, paper, document, or other thing filed or deposited with any clerk or officer of any court of the United States or in any public office or with any judicial or public officer of the United States shall be fined under this title and imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. So the crimes that I know he hasn't been tried yet and he hasn't been convicted, but give me a goddamn break. Okay, let's go through the formality. But this unconscionable thug, this grifter, let me just put it this way. In my not so humble opinion, this son of a bitch is guilty of violating both sections of the U.S. Code. And God knows his entire criminal grifter life is just littered with violations of the law that the bastard has escaped from. Or I should say, from which the bastard has escaped. Now, let me add some. I'm going to quote this thing in full. It's from the New York Times editorial board, who sometimes the board there sometimes writes things that I thoroughly agree with, sometimes I thoroughly don't agree with. Who gives a damn whether I agree or don't agree? But I want to share with you what the board wrote. However, before I get to that point, the legal brief that contained the warrant necessary to conduct the search at Trump's Winter Palace, when it was released today, had many pages totally redacted. Now, this will be the scum and the filth and the Christian terrorists who cluster around this bastard. All sorts of conspiracy theories to develop now. Oh, that's blacked out because it says he's innocent. You know, shit like that. Okay. But the DOJ legal brief references the legal brief that was filed to say, okay, we really don't think any of this should be released, Judge, but if it's going to be released, these are the redactions we need, and here are the reasons we need the redactions. And in that legal brief, one of the references is the risk involved to witnesses if the redactions aren't kept, well, redacted. I don't know how else to put it. And the Justice Department legal brief said it would outline 5 reasons for these proposed redactions to their affidavit. And the first reason the brief covered is the impact disclosing those details would have on witnesses. Now, the brief specifically used the plural, witnesses. And it's my understanding that there may be dozens of people who have provided testimony against this rotten son of a bitch, Donald Trump. Dozens of people, some of whom are probably in his so-called, well, most assuredly are in his so-called inner circle of vermin who are trying their goddamnedest to avoid spending time in federal prison themselves. Now, the Department of Justice argued when they made their case to the judge about what should be redacted, they argued that without the redactions, quote, the affidavit could be used to identify many, if not all, of these witnesses, end quote. Many, if not all, of these witnesses. Oh, my goodness. Well, now, what follows I'm going to share with you here is 2 paragraphs of redacted material. Quote, this is the explanation of why they're redacted. I mean, I don't have, the redactions removed, but why? Quote, if witnesses' identities are exposed, they could be subjected to harms, including retaliation, intimidation, or harassment, and even threats to their physical safety. As the court has already noted, these concerns are not hypothetical in this case. End quote. Now, let me just point out, they're talking about A former president of the United States who never should have been. This rotten fucker never should have been anything except the grifter that he is. But they're talking about, reality is reality. They're talking about a former president and saying the concerns about physical safety of witnesses is not or are not hypothetical. They know. The people who wrote the affidavit, the people who wrote the petition for the redactions, they know the criminal nature of this son of a bitch and the scum that operate around him in the same manner that the brown shirts operated around Adolf Hitler. The brief that was filed by the DOJ attorneys asking for redactions also noted how FBI agents involved in the investigation had already been identified as the judge who signed the search warrant himself. And all of them have received, quote, threats of violence from members of the public, end quote. This is how a Nazi fucking dictator wannabe like Donald Trump or any of these scum, this is how they operate. This is the only way they operate. This is always the way they operate. And to the 72 million people who voted for Trump, who are not listening to this podcast, but I'll toss it out there anyway, because sometimes they listen to the YouTube version of this podcast. You people are fucking insane voting for this criminal unless you completely agree with his tactics, which so many of you swine actually do. The filing asking for the redactions also said this, quote, exposure of witnesses' identities would likely erode their trust in the government's investigation, and it would almost certainly chill other potential witnesses from coming forward in this investigation and other investigations, end quote. Now, the language is similar to what the Department of Justice used in their public arguments to not release the affidavits. But to me, and I think anyone who can understand English, what the Department of Justice was saying to the court, we're dealing with somebody who considers violence one of his divine rights. You remember the divine right of kings when you studied history and the Magna Carta and how the nobles went to the king and said, okay, fucking enough. But this is how Trump thinks. Well, I shouldn't say thinks. This rat bastard doesn't think. This is how Trump sees things or reacts to situations. It's all him or it's all not him. There's no halfway ground for this prick. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com. And never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.